I'm Joe Elliott. I was in Peace Corps in Nairobi, Kenya from 1971 to just about 1973. I wasn't your typical Peace Corps volunteer. I was what was called a special placement. And I went from doing graduate work to teaching within 2 weeks of getting there to Kenya. We were just generally having a great time, you know. And so we went back to our motel, and the next morning we got this knock on the door, and this guy came out and he just had regular civilian clothes on. He said, "I want your passports." And we said, "Sorry, this was when Idi Amin was kicking all the people out of Uganda, and a passport was just, you know, very valuable." We said, "Sorry, buddy, we're not going to give you our passports. Get lost," kind of, because we'd been drinking and we were 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, that kind of thing. And so he clicked his hands, and these soldiers come in with rifles. And they said, "You will come with us." And they marched us out to an army truck, took us into the old prison down Dar es Salaam. And they had a Chinese guy that would sit there as they interrogated us separately. And they keep asking us when we came into the country over and over and over again. And what we used to do is when we go into Tanzania, we'd go through these little border posts, and we'd always give the guy cabbages, you know, at the border, because they love to have cabbages. And so we went through there, and one of us apparently didn't have an entry stamp on our passport. Well, that wouldn't be bad enough, but that night somebody stole a East African Airways jet from Dar es Salaam and flew it around and landed at Arusha on the dirt landing strip. And the gunboats from Uganda were shelling the Tanzanian coast that same night. And so obviously we were involved in this. And so they kept us there for about 12 hours, and I'll never forget the best line I've ever used, and it apparently worked, was I said, "Perhaps you don't know who we are." And, and we want to see the American, Swiss, and Australian ambassador immediately. And they said, "You can leave the country immediately." And we went, our car was the doors were open on it, and all our stuff was stolen and everything else. And so we left the country. And the next day we looked on the television. They had only a few televisions in Nairobi that were working. And the guy that came and knocked on the door was standing by Julius Nyerere, right beside the president of the country. So this is pretty high level exercise.
Well, but no, what do you mean he was standing next to Nyerere?
Nyerere was on television explaining what's going on. This guy that came and knocked on the door was standing right next to him.
So, the guy that knocked on your
yeah,
door?
right, yeah.
Wow. Oh, okay.
So that's the best story. And then there's
Cheslak.
Okay.
I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Kenya as a teacher. And I was there from 1975 through 1977.
Margot Jean Child. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Kenya, served in Mombasa, and worked in the rural areas around there. I was a Red Cross volunteer in 1977 to 1979. Wonderful 2 years of my life.
Hi, I'm Skip Stats. I was a volunteer in Kenya from 1977 to 1980. There I was a teacher in the Harambee schools. And I had a fantastic experience, stayed for 3 years.
My name is Carolyn Carey. I was in Kenya from 1979 to 1982, and I taught math at a girls' high school in Kisii.
Therese Graham. I was in Kenya in 1980 and...
Miss Karen Scharf. I was in Kenya 1980 through 1982. I was a water engineer. I built and designed and built rural water systems.
Fantastic.
In northern Kenya.
Hi, I'm Elaine McDermott. I was in Kenya in Peace Corps in 1982 and 3. It was kind of my post-midlife crisis time, and I taught at a girls' boarding school, and I lived on Mount Kenya, so I had the best place to live in the whole country, and enjoyed my job, and I'm very sorry that I haven't been able to get back to my school.
Hi, Hi, my name is Cindy Duda. I was in Kenya from 1982 through 1984. I was a fisheries extension volunteer, and what that means is I helped subsistence farmers build fish ponds and raise tilapia. I worked with about 40 families in those 2 years that I was there. My oldest farmer had been in World War II. He was had served in the North African Theater, and he built 5 fish ponds with me. His name was Makona, and my youngest fish farmer was a 12-year-old boy named Walimu. How sad.
Kenya, 1982 to 1984. Kapsakwani was my village.
Okay, and what did you do there?
I was a rural women's extension volunteer, and I lived near 2 other volunteers, a fisheries volunteer and a teacher.
Go for it.
Hi, I'm Cindy Huff. I served in Kenya from 1993 to 1995. I went back as a trainer of Peace Corps volunteers in 97 and 98.
My name is Joan Kelly, and I was in Kenya from 93 to 95 at a deaf school out in Webuye in the west part of Kenya, and then in Nairobi.
Michi Voita. I served at the Peace Corps in Kenya, which is in East Africa, from 1993 through 1996, and I was assigned to be an agroforester. But my job was basically the town crier. That's what I tell people. I pretty much did everything. I decided that I was going to try to encourage people to use solar cookers, because to try to reduce the firewood consumption. People cook with firewood. But so when trying to get the solar cookers, it was a little weird for people, so they ended up, one of the things I did was easy cook with a solar cooker was I would bake cakes. And it ended up that everyone came to my solar cooking demonstrations because they wanted to learn how to bake cakes. They really weren't interested in the solar cookers as much. So I would bake a cake, and I would explain to people how to bake them, because at this time in Kenya they didn't have they didn't have the knowledge of baking cakes themselves. So then I started just doing cake baking lessons. So I would actually go to the community and speak in Swahili and write in English the recipes for baking cakes. And one of the things I wanted to do was, my neighbor's daughter was 16 at the time, and she was the youngest of 5, and she had she was crippled from a vaccination, an anti-polio vaccination, I think. And so they treated her, she was a baby, she was the youngest, and she was handicapped, so they treated her like she couldn't do anything. And so I wanted to teach her, because I thought this would be a great way to empower her to do something that other people didn't know how to do, so they would acknowledge her as a person who could do something they couldn't do, that was something they wanted to do. But she never came, and then they sent their other daughter instead. And finally she came, and she was sulky, and she didn't want to do it. And then she, so finally, I think she didn't believe in herself, because no one ever believed in her. And then when she found out she could do it, she was so excited. This was in December, so like 2 days later, she came to my house, and it was actually Christmas Eve. It was the 24th of December, and it was after dusk. So in Kenya, that's considered Christmas Day. And she came, and so she not only brought her cousin, who she taught how to bake cakes, but she brought me a cake. And I had taught her to make a chocolate cake, but she made half chocolate, half non-chocolate, and she marbled it. And so it became like this marbled, beautiful cake. Sorry. It became this marbled cake, so it was gorgeous. She made this beautiful marbled cake, and so that for me was the greatest gift, and it was a great Christmas gift. Somebody who took what I taught her and shared it with someone else, and expanded and extrapolated and was able to swirl it and make a marble cake. So that's my story. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Headings. I served in Kenya from 1995 to 97 as a water and sanitation technician in Matano Mane.
My name is Gary Bank. I was a Peace Corps volunteer teaching English. That was my job in Kenya, 1995 to 1997. My favorite stories there are 2 stories. There was a woman in the village. When she saw me, see, word gets around real quick as to who this white person is and what they're doing. Word spreads like wildfire when you're the only person in, the only Mzungu in the area, the only white person around. Oh, he's teacher at the school, so forth. This woman would come and she would hold my hand and look me in the eye, and she would shake my hand for 2 minutes. I think she said Chemge, but for 2 minutes she would shake my hand and talk to me. I did not understand a word she said. Although I think, like I said, I think she said Chemge, which in the local language means hello. I didn't, nonverbal communication. I didn't understand a word she said. The message she was saying was, thank you for coming here. It's so wonderful. Now my son or daughter's going to learn English. It's so, she would shake my hand and talk to me for 2 minutes. One occasion, the second or third time, the guy next to me who I knew, who I was visiting, he said, she's thanking you for coming here. I said, I know. I said, Kariba, which means you're welcome to them. Another one, that was the Kalenjin lady, because I think she spoke Kalenjin only, local tribal language. When I left that school on Thursday morning, after we had our little coffee break, they have tea, but much more popular there. I would go, Thursday would be the village trading day, and people would come in and buy what they call matatus, collective taxis, and they would bring their stuff and set it out and sell it. It was the village market trading day. As I left our coffee break time to go over to buy fruits and vegetables, etc., the next school was an elementary school, and at that particular time, the kids came out. I think they were equivalent to kindergarten, maybe first grade. And they would be on their recess, what we would call recess, their playground time. And they see me, it's only a couple hundred yards to walk to the pavement and walk to the village. They see me and they come, habari, habari, which is hello in the local language. Big smiles, and they came running across what they call a games pitch, which is basically, it's a soccer field there. Informal soccer field. Came running across this, crawled through a barbed wire fence, and shake your hand. Everybody's jumping up and down, habari, habari. And they all have to shake your hand. Normal part of greeting in Kenya. You just can't say, hello, Bob, how are you doing? You have to go and shake your hands. That's normal part of greeting. So they're all jumping up and down, and hello, hello. And after they shake your hand, they have to have a piece of it. So I got one or two of them on each finger. And they're all jumping up and down. What it is, we found a white person. Wow, that's my first white person. Second, or every Thursday, this would happen. The same thing. They come running across, habari, habari, jumping up and down and grabbing on me and so forth. About the third or fourth time, they figured something out. And what they would do, it's pretty hard to show you when you're probably only shooting my head and face, but one of them would take my jacket and pull the sleeve up a little bit. Another one took my pant sleeve and pulled it up a little bit. This guy's white all over. How did that happen? That's the first Mzungu, that's the first white person that they saw. Habari, habari, and they were really all pleased. So and I was smiling too, because all these kids are glomming around me, getting a piece. They all have to hold on to you a little bit on one finger or whatever. In fact, there was one girl who was shy. And she finally, when we got done with that, she finally was standing there, and I shook her hand too, and she found out the white person was not so all terrible and dangerous.